Hi, my name is Kerry Eames. Have you ever heard of an organization called Solar for Our Schools? It's an effort created by the Bonneville Environmental Foundation that teaches students, teachers, and the community about the science and benefits of renewable energy technology. In Idaho alone, there are 15 different projects going, including one at my own school, Idaho Arts Charter School in Nampa, Idaho. Part of the Solar for Our Schools grant was to teach an environmental studies class there at the school. The class would teach students using activities and projects about renewable energy. So let's go meet the teacher who's teaching that class and actually got us the grant for the school, Mrs. Damaris White. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kerry.
So was getting this grant for the school all your idea?
Yes.
And where did you hear about it?
I attended a conference in Portland, a national science convention, and in that convention we were able to go off-site on some field trips, and I visited a school in Portland in the city that had solar for our schools. I was very impressed what they could do as students, what the kids were learning, the accessibility of it, and so then I found out it was a grant and I applied for it.
What do you think about the organization?
I've been very happy with it. They've been wonderful to work with, the Bonneville Power, and they provided us with a lot of equipment. Not only did they put the solar panels on the building and show us how it worked and worked with our technicians locally, they provided extra equipment and toys, in a sense, little solar cells, wind equipment, curriculum ideas, curriculum guidelines, and then the online web piece where other schools throughout the state, throughout the nation that are on the Solar for Our Schools program that have had solar panels installed, their data is also online. So we can compare, see what our school is doing, and then compare it with other schools locally or across the nation. So it's a very well-run program.
You taught the environmental science class, right? What was that like? It
was my first year. It was very fun. I'm learning a lot. It's not my natural background, and so I enjoy learning, and so this is an opportunity for me to delve into some new topics. I think it makes sense to expose students to the idea of how can we be resourceful. Being green is being resourceful and not being wasteful and looking at the full picture. And so it fits in very nicely with an environmental science class.
Do you believe that the things that you taught in this class were worthwhile?
Yes, I do, because students from our future, they will live in a world where we have to make choices about how we use resources. Yes, we have certain lifestyles, but there's a cost to that, and we can make choices, and how do we make those choices? How do we individually, and how do we as a corporate society? So I think it brings a lot of discussion into the classroom.
You and your class have been keeping track of the statistics brought in by the solar panels.
Yes, at this point it was a new technology.
In terms of other schools in the area like Capitol High School or Payette High School, who are also part of the project, they joined in 2007, and they use a different kind of panels. The whole thing was an experiment to see if this new kind of...
The thin film.
Yeah, the thin film panel would work as good or better.
Yes. The older panels were able to, they were mounted, they were set and angled to a certain position to receive maximum sunlight, where ours is a thin film laid flat on the roof, so it is not angled, but it's very thin, very easy to install. And it is less expensive, but it takes a little more square footage. So that was part of the experiment. Yes, we're covering a little more square feet, but at a lower cost per square foot, but will we receive as much kilowatts? And it's been really, I was discouraged in the winter months. In the winter months, I would watch and compare, and we were equivalent or a little bit below. And I thought, well, it's okay, it's interesting, but as spring hit, and I watched, we tracked the data, and so for our math classes, we used this to look at real data, scatter plot, what does it tell us? And all of a sudden, as soon as I saw the data in a graph form, we saw this natural incline, and all of a sudden, the amount that we were able to collect in terms of kilowatts was increasing at a much higher rate than the other schools. So in an average day, we're at and for a complete day, a 24-hour period, we're up to over 10 kilowatts, whereas the other schools on the older standard system are at 5.5 or 6 kilowatts per day.
Do you think other schools in the state or across the country should be a part of this project?
Well, I think being a part of the project is great. They only offer one, in Idaho, in the state of Idaho, they only offer one grant a year. So we were very fortunate to receive it. So if every school would apply, that would be great, but they can only give one a year.
Right. But if this sort of opportunity was open, do you think everyone should go for it?
Yes, I don't see why not. The more we study, the more we learn. We have to make choices with energy. The more children are exposed, students are exposed to practical options, and there are cost benefits just like in any kind of project. So solar, so that's one of the things we discussed. Why do not more people have solar if it makes so much sense? Well, there are some cost issues. And then we looked at wind and a variety of different options. But the more students think that something's out there that might be practical, the more likely they may be to incorporate it into their personal lifestyle, their business if they choose to have a business when they're older. So the more we talk about it, the more normal it seems.
Thanks for your time and doing this interview with me.
Thank you, Kerry.
As I mentioned earlier, our school was installed with a new experimental kind of solar panels. It's a 120-watt unisolar technology stick-down laminate. Unisolar PV laminates are composed of a thin-film photovoltaic material encapsulated in UV-stabilized weather-resistant polymers. They're embedded between layers of proven encapsulated materials. The front surface is composed of a Teflon-like material that is high-light transmissive, allowing for optimal sunlight absorption. In other words, it doesn't stop the sunlight from getting in. Now, we should all know that light is made up of wavelengths and a spectrum. Well, photovoltaic technology is designed to capture these wavelengths and light spectrums and turn it into energy. Unisolar PV panels utilize unique triple-junction thin-film solar cells made from amorphous silicon and silicon germanium. Rather than just one part of the spectrum, these cells absorb blue, green, and red light, converting a wider spectrum of light into electricity. Unisolar PV laminates have been shown and tested to provide higher performance levels compared to other photovoltaic technologies, whether it was crystalline or thin film. It's lightweight, easy to install, flexible, and durable. But how do solar panels work? Well, most solar panels are actually made up of silicon crystals. The crystals at an atomic level are held together with electronic bonds. The electrons are rigid and in place, but when hit with the correct wavelength of light, become super excited and begin to spin around the atom. This creates a current which is harnessed and turned into electricity. The kids in Mrs. White's class have been working on some projects concerning renewable energy. I have some of the students here with me today to show me some of the things they've worked on. So this is Philip, Eli, and Isaac. What is this?
This is a solar-powered car. What we have on here is just a little 1.5 volt motor with a 3 volt PV solar cell. And basically when it hits the sun, the wheels move.
Can we see it work? Of course. So tell us exactly what goes into making one of these.
Well, one of these, it takes normally about a day, probably. And you get these 2 little bars here. You get these 4 little parts that you put the bar through, and then you put the wheels on separate. You take the motor, and there's this little sticky thing that you attach to the plastic. And then I put these on here to better position the solar cell to the sun. And that's about all it takes. You just attach the wires to the motor, and your car's ready to go.
Solar for our schools. Spread the word.